An old war veteran named Henry Callahan lived alone in a cabin the town had long mocked until one stormy winter. A safety inspector uncovered a hidden underground bunker beneath his land. What they found inside wasn't just a shelter, it was a living machine, quietly keeping the entire forest alive. This is the story of a veteran's hidden bunker, and the secret that could change how we see nature and ourselves forever. Before we begin, drop a comment and let us know where you're watching from. And make sure to hit subscribe because the next story might just shake everything you believe. Let's get started. For over 30 winters, a quiet man named Henry Callahan lived alone on the far edge of Redstone County, a stretch of land most folks had forgotten even existed. His cabin stood crooked near the base of a craggy hill, its roof patched with rusted tin and tar, its windows clouded with age. The townspeople whispered about him, called him the Tin Hermit, joked that he was probably building a rocket ship or hoarding canned beans like some doomsday prophet. They never saw him at the diner. He never came into town for church. And every time someone got close, he'd vanish back into the woods before a word could be said. People laughed. They judged. They rolled their eyes at the man with a beard like a mountain and eyes like storm clouds. But they didn't know about the war. They didn't know about the loss, about the quiet that he carried like a second skin. And they definitely didn't know what was buried underneath that worn-out cabin, not until the county sent a safety inspector named Ava Sinclair out there after a strange anomaly was picked up by thermal imaging. What she found would leave her breathless and change the town forever. The snow that year had come early and heavy. It blanketed the hills outside Redstone County like a white shroud, swallowing trails and silencing everything beneath it. Most folks stayed in, kept to their fireplaces and radio static, but one morning, deep in the county's records office, a blinking anomaly appeared on a government monitor, a constant heat signature coming from a restricted parcel of land that, according to every map, was supposed to be uninhabited. No permits, no power lines, no reason for anyone to be there. Normally, it would have been shrugged off a glitch, a rogue hunter's campfire, but the signature pulsed like a heartbeat, night after night, consistent, controlled. Ava Sinclair didn't scare easy. As one of the youngest county safety inspectors, she'd hiked through more backwoods than most of the men in her office, but even she hesitated when she saw the coordinates. That was Henry Callahan's land, and no one in town had stepped foot near his property in years. Still, rules were rules, and the signal had to be checked. The drive out took most of the morning. The county plow hadn't cleared those roads in weeks. She parked where the road gave way to forest and switched to snowshoes, her breath curling in the air like smoke. The only sounds were the crunch of snow and the whisper of wind in the trees. It was deeper in the woods than she expected the walk, long and lonely. But finally, past the third ridge, nestled into the hillside, she saw it. A cabin, slouched and ancient, half swallowed by snow and time. Smoke rose in a thin, steady column from a rusted stovepipe. It wasn't the smoke that startled her, though. It was the silence, not dead, but listening. She knocked on the weather-beaten door. It opened slower than she expected. Behind it stood Henry Callahan, older than any photograph she'd seen, his gray beard tangled, his eyes sharp beneath bushy brows. He didn't speak right away, just stared at her like someone expecting a ghost. "I'm Ava Sinclair," she said, her voice careful. "County inspector. We picked up some unusual readings from this area, and—" "You shouldn't have come alone," he said flatly. "I didn't have a choice," she replied. "I'm just here to verify, that's all." He studied her for a long moment, then stepped aside. "The storm's coming," he said. "You'd better wait it out inside." Something about his tone left no room for argument. Inside, the cabin was unexpectedly warm, not just from the stove, but from underneath. The floors radiated a deep, even heat, not the dry crackle of firewood, but a quiet, humming warmth like the air itself was alive. She sat near the fire, glancing around. The room was dimly lit, cluttered with tools and maps, shelves lined with hand-carved figurines, deer, owls, even people, some smiling, some not. She gestured to the warmth beneath her boots. "You have geothermal heating?" she asked. Callahan didn't answer. Instead, he poked at the fire and muttered, "Not exactly." Ava narrowed her eyes. "Then what exactly is it?" He finally looked at her. "It's the reason I stayed." And before she could ask anything else, the cabin rumbled, faint but unmistakable, a vibration underfoot, steady like breath. She jumped. "Is that an earthquake?" "No," he said calmly. "It's the system adjusting." The system. Henry stood and crossed to a corner of the room where a thick woven rug lay flat on the floor. With one motion, he pulled it aside, revealing a hatch metal-lined, seamless with the floor, but pulsing gently with that same golden warmth. "What is that?" Ava asked, her voice low. He looked at her, and something in his eyes softened. "You came to check on a heat source. This is it. But it's not just heat. It's a promise." A promise. He placed a calloused hand on the hatch. "I built something down there after the war. Not to fight, not to hide, to heal." Ava swallowed, her mind racing. "You built a bunker." He gave a faint, tired smile. "Not like you're thinking. Not walls and weapons. Something different, something alive." The wind howled outside, rattling the shutters. Ava looked at the door, then back at the hatch. "You don't have to be afraid," Henry said gently. "But if you go down there, you'll never see this place the same again." And she knew he wasn't just talking about the cabin. He was talking about the world. The hatch opened with a sigh, not the creak of rusted hinges, but a soft mechanical exhale. Warm air spilled upward, thick with the scent of earth and iron, as if the hill itself were breathing. Ava hesitated, not from fear, but from something deeper. Reverence, maybe, or the unsettling feeling that she was about to step into a place not meant for people like her. Henry descended first, lantern in hand. The light danced along the walls, revealing a spiraling staircase made from oak and stone, reinforced with copper bands that shimmered in the glow. Each step echoed softly, as though the walls themselves were absorbing sound. When she reached the bottom, Ava stopped in awe. The chamber was vast, far larger than the cabin above should have allowed. The walls were carved from packed clay, laced with pulsing copper veins that glowed faintly like veins beneath skin. In the center of the room, embedded into the floor like a heart in a chest, was a circular machine unlike anything she'd ever seen. It wasn't modern, it wasn't old, it was something else. It breathed. Thin tubes extended outward like roots, disappearing into the clay walls. A soft hum vibrated through the chamber, steady and slow like the rhythm of sleep. Ava turned slowly in place, taking it all in. "You built this." Henry's voice was calm, with time and patience and listening to what she whispered. He placed a hand on the copper-lined wall. The land, the frost, the pressure, everything speaks, if you stop talking long enough to hear it. She stepped closer to the machine, the warmth drawing her in like a fire on a bitter night. There were no buttons, no screens, just smooth metal, etched with faint markings that looked almost natural, like bark or wind trails on water. "It started as a bunker," Henry said softly, "but over time, it became something else, something the forest began to grow around." "You mean the forest knows it's here?" Ava asked, half skeptical, half believing already. "I don't know if it knows," he replied, "but it responds. The roots shifted, the soil adjusted. The seasons began to sync with it. I stopped fighting the world. I built with it." The air in the room was heavier than above, not stifling, but rich, saturated with energy that didn't feel like electricity. It felt organic. But why, she asked, why hide this? Why live like that old man in the woods everyone makes fun of? Henry turned to her, eyes steady. Because the minute they see it, they'll want to own it, cut it up, patent it, tear it apart to understand it, and in doing so, kill it. Some things, he said, are meant to exist quietly, like roots under snow. A sudden vibration cut through the chamber stronger this time. Ava stumbled. Dust fell from the ceiling beams. Was that an earthquake? Henry didn't move. No, he said, it's the system. It's adjusting. To what? He looked up at the ceiling, at the dirt above them. The thaw came early this year. The balance is shifting. When that happens, the system pulls harder. More heat, more flow, more breath. Is that safe? Henry didn't answer. The hum deepened. The copper veins flickered, then dimmed. For a moment, everything stopped, even the silence. Then a sound. A low clang, distant but deliberate, echoed from the far wall. Ava turned toward it and saw something she hadn't noticed before a second door. Taller, heavier, made of iron and shadow. There was no handle, just a faint seam in the clay. What's that? She asked. Henry's voice was quiet, almost too quiet. That's the part I don't go near. Another clang, closer this time. Ava stepped back. Henry, I think something's waking up, he murmured. The hum returned, louder now, but less like breath and more like a warning. The air thickened. The copper veins brightened to a dull orange. You said it's alive, Ava said, her voice trembling. Is that thing part of it? Henry's eyes locked onto the door. It's where the excess goes. Heat, pressure, sometimes memory. Memory. He looked at her, and for the first time, she saw fear. It remembers what it was built for, shelter, safety, but sometimes it remembers the war. Ava's breath caught. Outside, the wind howled. Inside, the chamber throbbed with energy. And behind the iron door, something stirred. The silence that followed the second clang was worse than the sound itself. It pressed down on Ava's chest, thick and suffocating, as if the very air inside the chamber was waiting, holding its breath. Henry didn't speak. He didn't have to. His eyes said it all. The hum beneath their feet shifted again, deeper now, not mechanical, not even fully natural. It was a pulse, a rhythm, the cadence of something that wasn't just running but feeling. Come on, he said finally, his voice dry. We should get back above ground. But now, Ava. She followed him back up the winding staircase, every step echoing like a question she wasn't ready to ask. When they emerged into the cabin, the wind outside had picked up, snow swirling past the frosted windows like ash in a storm. But the cabin still held its strange warmth, that hum still whispering through the floorboards. Henry collapsed into the chair near the stove, hands clasped, face drawn. What's behind that door? Ava asked again. The iron one. He didn't answer, not at first. It was supposed to be sealed, he murmured. Just a fail-safe, a pressure dump. But I think something's changed. You mean the system malfunctioned? No, he looked at her now. I mean it evolved. Ava frowned, pacing slowly across the wooden floor. You said it was part of the forest, that it adjusted to nature. Are you telling me it's growing by itself? Henry nodded once. At first, it needed me to guide it, to understand what the land wanted. But then it started, anticipating, reacting faster than I could. Root flow, air pressure, even frost shifts. It learned the rhythm of the mountain better than I ever could. He ran a hand through his gray beard. Now I just help it along. Ava's stomach turned. That sounds like AI, like you created a thinking machine. No, he shook his head. Not intelligence, instinct, like vines reaching for light, like rivers carving stone. It doesn't know what it is, but it wants to live. She looked down at the floor beneath her. The hum was softer now, slower, like breath in sleep. But that door, she said, that wasn't instinct. That was memory. You said so. Henry's voice lowered. There are parts of us we bury deep, pain, fear, even purpose. I think the system is doing the same. You mean it's remembering you? He stared at the fire. I built it after the war, not because I feared death, but because I couldn't trust life. I needed order, predictability, so I created it beneath the only thing still alive, the earth. His voice broke slightly. I thought I was building peace, but maybe I was just building control. Ava sat across from him now, the firelight dancing between them. Her coat steamed lightly from the warmth, but her mind was far from calm. You could have told someone, she whispered. You could have gotten help. His eyes flicked to hers, not angry, just tired. And they'd turn it into a lab, or a weapon, or a tourist stop. You've seen what they do to anything they don't understand. She had, and that truth sat bitter on her tongue. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. Outside, the storm howled louder. Inside, the hum shifted again, a ripple of energy that passed through the cabin like a heartbeat too strong to hide. Ava rose slowly, walking back to the hatch. She didn't open it, just stood there, hand resting on the woven rug. I came here to report on a heat source, she said softly, but I think what I found is something alive. Henry nodded, his voice barely above a whisper. And now that you've heard it, you'll never forget its sound. That night, Ava didn't sleep. She sat near the window while Henry dozed in his chair, the fire casting soft shadows across the cabin walls. Outside, the storm had calmed into a slow, steady fall. Snowflakes drifting like ash onto the white buried forest. But her mind was anything but still. She kept hearing it, that hum, that soft, endless thrum beneath the floorboards. It wasn't just sound anymore. It was sensation. It moved through her boots, into her bones, into her thoughts, like it had found a way in. And worse, it didn't feel foreign anymore. By morning, the snow had stopped completely. The sun filtered through clouds in faint golden streaks, casting a glow over the clearing. Ava stepped outside while Henry stoked the stove in silence. The world looked untouched, no footprints, no sound, just the whisper of pine boughs under the weight of snow. But beneath it all, she could feel it, the pulse, as if the forest itself was breathing through the ground. Henry joined her quietly, handing her a mug of something warm and herbal. Does it always feel like this? She asked, not looking at him. No, he said, only when it's listening. Ava sipped the tea. Earthy, slightly bitter. It's not just responding to the land anymore, is it? Henry shook his head. It's responding to us. She turned to him now, fully facing the man who'd been the town's ghost for decades, the veteran, the hermit, the builder. You've built something that works in perfect harmony with the earth, she said. A closed system, self-sustaining, responsive, quiet, clean. I built it to survive, he replied, not to impress anyone. But that's the point. Henry. Her voice lifted, just slightly. You didn't just survive, you thrived. You built something the rest of the world is starving for. He narrowed his eyes. I know that tone. What tone? The opportunity tone, he said, sipping from his cup. The one people use before they start talking about sharing, scaling, monetizing, turning peace into product. Ava smiled faintly. Not all opportunity is selfish. He raised a brow. She took a breath. What if you could teach this, not give it away, not let them take it, but guide them, show how to build with the world instead of against it? You're not the only one who's lost faith in concrete and wires and noise. Henry, people are hungry for something real. He looked past her, toward the trees, toward the hill that breathed beneath them. I left the world because it stopped making sense, he said, because it taught me that everything sacred gets consumed eventually. You think they'd let this place live once they saw it? No. They'd dissect it? Not if you stay in control. He turned to her slowly. Control's an illusion. I thought I had control of it once, until it started learning on its own, adapting. That's not my system anymore. Ava. It's ours now, mine and the forests. And maybe even something else. She paused, then asked quietly, "What if that's the future?" Henry studied her. "What do you mean? What if you didn't just build a sanctuary, but a blueprint?" The idea hung in the air between them. Ava could feel it, the weight of possibility, not in skyscrapers or cities, but in soil, in balance, in the patient breath of a mountain. Maybe this place wasn't meant to stay hidden forever. Maybe it was meant to grow, but on its own terms. Carefully, quietly, like roots. Henry exhaled. "You'd risk that, sharing even a piece of this, knowing what they might do." "I'd risk it," she said, "if it meant giving the world a second chance." They stood in silence for a moment. And then, for the first time since she'd arrived, Henry Callahan smiled, not the polite, weary kind, but something gentler, warmer, a flicker of hope. "I still don't trust them," he muttered. "That's okay," Ava replied. "You don't have to trust the world, just let it learn." He nodded slowly. "Then tomorrow," he said, "I'll show you the rest of the system." By the time morning arrived, the forest had shed its white armor. Ice melted from the pine boughs. Water dripped rhythmically from the cabin's eaves. The storm had passed, but something deeper was shifting, not in the weather, but in them. Ava stood outside, watching the mist lift slowly from the earth. Her breath no longer fogged in front of her. The air was warmer, softer, alive. She could feel the hum again, not just under her feet now, but within her. Inside the cabin, Henry was already moving quietly, methodically adjusting wires, scribbling notes in a small, weathered journal. The same man who had once closed himself off from the world now stood preparing to show someone everything. It wasn't trust yet, but it was close. "Ready?" he asked, not looking up. Ava nodded, more than ever. They descended the hatch again, the golden light rising to meet them like a memory. The chamber below was unchanged, same soft pulse through the walls, same warm earth scent that reminded her of old roots and buried stories. But something was different. This time, Henry didn't avoid the machine's center. He walked straight to it, palms out, slow, reverent. He placed both hands gently on the surface and closed his eyes. Immediately, the copper veins along the walls brightened, responding to his touch like nerves waking from sleep. "It listens to you," Ava whispered. "No," he said softly. "It remembers me." She stepped closer, watching the glow spread like morning sunlight across damp soil. "Is that why you stayed all these years?" Henry took a long breath. "I thought I was running, from the world, from the past, but somewhere along the way, this place stopped being a hiding spot and became a reflection. A reflection of what? My guilt," he said, "my grief, but also my hope." The words landed gently, but they cracked something open in Ava. She saw him now not as the hermit everyone laughed at, not even as the brilliant builder of a living machine, but as a man who'd spent decades stitching his pain into the ground, turning it into something that could breathe. And somehow, she felt herself becoming part of it too. He showed her the inner workings of the system water collectors buried deep in the soil, condensation veins running like arteries along the beams, heat drawn from geothermal pockets and cycled back through channels interwoven with root clusters. Every piece connected, every flow had purpose. There was no waste, no noise, no excess. "It's not just technology," Ava whispered. "It's harmony." Henry nodded. "I learned to stop forcing the world to bend around me, started letting it shape me instead." She turned to him. "And now?" He looked toward the iron door at the back of the chamber, the one that hadn't opened. "Now I realize it might be time to let go." That caught her off guard. "You mean leave?" He shook his head. "No. Let go of the idea that I have to be here for it to live. You said it yourself. Maybe this is a blueprint. Maybe it's meant to spread. Quietly, thoughtfully, like seeds." Ava stepped forward, reaching out and placing her hand beside his on the machine's surface. It was warm beneath her fingers, steady, like a heartbeat. "I think it's already growing," she said. For the first time, Henry didn't flinch at the idea. They stood like that for a long while, builder and witness, connected not by wires, but by understanding. And somewhere above them, in the woods beyond the melted frost, the first green shoots of spring pushed quietly through the soil, fed by a system no one else in the world knew existed. Yet, Ava left the forest at dusk. The wind had shifted again, but it wasn't the bitter bite of storm. This time it was gentler now, like the breath of something ancient exhaling. The trees stood tall and still, their shadows stretching across the snowy hills like guardians keeping watch over a secret far too sacred to name. Behind her, the cabin had almost disappeared into the slope of the hill, a part of the land now, a scar that had grown over and healed. She paused at the ridge, looking back one last time. There was no smoke rising from the chimney, no sign of movement, and yet she felt it, the pulse, the hum, the breath of the thing buried beneath the ground, still alive, still listening. When she reached her vehicle, her radio crackled back to life. A voice called her name, her location, her report. She stared at the mic in silence for a long moment. Then, calmly, she pressed the button. "This is Sinclair. Area's clear. No signs of risk. Everything stable." There was a pause on the other end, then a soft copy that night, she stayed at a ranger outpost just outside the reserve. The heater clicked softly in the corner. The lights buzzed faintly overhead, but the silence in her chest was louder, deeper than any room could hold. She reached into her pack to pull out her thermos and froze. There, tucked neatly beneath her gear, was something she hadn't packed. A wooden carving. A bird, wings outstretched, frozen mid-flight. The grain of the wood so detailed it looked as if the feathers might lift on the breeze. She turned it over slowly in her hands. There was no note, no name, just memory carved into shape. It wasn't a goodbye. It was a reminder. In the days that followed, Ava filed her reports. She gave no coordinates, no blueprints, no mention of the chamber or the living system below. The town moved on, as towns do. People still laughed when Henry Callahan's name came up at the diner, still called him the Tin Hermit. But Ava didn't laugh anymore, because she knew the truth not just about the bunker or the warmth or the hum, but about the man who had built a living sanctuary while the world above had forgotten how to listen. Weeks turned into months. Spring came, and with it, a strange new rhythm to the forest deer returning earlier, wildflowers blooming wider. The ecosystem was changing, quietly, without announcement, without applause. Just like Henry had wanted. One evening, Ava found herself hiking back toward the ridge again. She didn't bring a report or a radio. She brought seeds and silence. She stood at the top of the hill, watching the wind carry new growth across the valley. Somewhere far beneath her boots, she could still feel it faint, steady, eternal. That heartbeat! And for the first time, she realized something. It wasn't just Henry's bunker. It wasn't just a machine. It wasn't even just a miracle. It was a reminder that the earth doesn't forget us when we fall quiet. It welcomes us back if we're willing to listen. Sometimes, the people we dismiss the fastest are the ones carrying the deepest truths. Henry Callahan wasn't just a reclusive old man in a crooked cabin. He was a mirror reflecting the pain, resilience, and quiet genius that the world often overlooks. In a time where noise equals value, he chose silence. Where others built over nature, he built with it. He didn't try to conquer the earth. He listened to it, adapted, and in doing so, he created something more powerful than invention harmony. His story reminds us that healing doesn't always look like progress, that growth isn't always loud, and that sometimes the most important work happens in the dark, beneath the surface, where no one is watching except the roots. Not everything needs to be known to be meaningful. Some things are meant to be felt. And in a world obsessed with exposure, maybe the greatest act of wisdom is choosing what not to reveal. If this story moved you, subscribe and tap the bell so you won't miss the quiet ones that speak the loudest. Share it with someone who needs to feel seen today. Thank you for watching. We'll see you in the next story.